Hello. Today is day 23 of Bible in 90 Days, or What's in the Bible, where we're reading through the entire Bible from Genesis through all the books of the Old Testament, then Matthew, all the way to Revelation. We're doing this so as to just get a summary, to get an idea of what the Bible talks about. Yeah, because most times, you can study a little book on its own, or a verse, or a passage, or a few different things, or podcast, or whatever. But I think sometimes it's just good to know what the entire Bible says, because I think the more we know of what the entire Bible says, the more we can understand, certain passages or certain books, and get to see really the character of God, as a whole. So yesterday, we were talking a lot about David's kingship, because we're now in this era where the Israelites were being led by kings. So David was the second king of Israel, who came after King Saul. King Saul was obviously taken out because of his disobedience, etc. But David is now the king at this point. However, we had seen all the good things that were happening in David's reign yesterday, until the very end, where he sinned as far as Bathsheba was concerned, by sleeping with her and trying to cover it up, then also killing Uriah in the process. Today, I think we get to see a different side, really, of what happened in David's reign and some of the challenges that he faced. And I actually think that some of these bits that we're reading now, like yesterday and the day before, help us to understand, or will help us to understand, when we get to the book of Psalms, because most of the Psalms were written by David, and they probably would have been coming out of the experiences, that he was having. So the more you understand the story, then when David is talking about his enemies and things that are happening and how he wants protection from God in the book of Psalms, having this background actually helps you, understand that. So 2 Samuel chapter 13 to 22 is today's reading. And it starts off on a really sad note. 2 Samuel 13, a guy called Amnon, who is David's firstborn son, rapes his sister Tamar, but David does nothing about it. Absalom, who is Tamar's brother, is not happy about it, and figures out a way. Then he kills Amnon for this, and he flees after a while, because obviously David wouldn't see him, and there was a bit of issue with the fact that he had also killed in revenge Amnon. He flees, but after a while David then seeks to be reconciled with with Absalom, because maybe he had forgiven him, or he was over it at that point. 2 Samuel 14, Joab knows about this, and he creates a scenario for David to be able to bring Absalom back. Absalom then has some children, and one of them is actually called Tamar, probably in honor of his of his sister. So David does not see Absalom for 2 years. Although he had brought him back, he still said, you can't come in my presence, I can't see you, or whatever. But after this 2 years, Absalom then forces matters, to make sure that he would be able to see David face to face once again. 2 Samuel 15, Absalom, now there is a conspiracy, that he starts up to take the kingdom forcibly away from David. Ahithophel, one of David's counselors, also joins in this conspiracy to support Absalom to be the new king, of Israel. So this leads David to to flee. But we see the loyalty of some of the people that were around him. He also then leaves some people that he could trust in this new government of Absalom, so that they could send word back to him, or feed him information about exactly what Absalom was planning. So at this point, we can pretty much say Absalom was now the king of Israel, whilst David had to flee. He fled from Jerusalem, and he wasn't with the ark, because the ark had to remain in Jerusalem with the priests, etc. 2 Samuel 16, some people come up to help David, but some also people take this opportunity to air their grievances that they had had all along, with David, because some people thought, well, Saul's generation was supposed to continue in the kingship, but it moved from Saul's house, to David's house. Absalom is then advised by Ahithophel to pitch a tent on the roof and do something that, would show how much he hated David. So he did that thing, and it didn't go well. 2 Samuel 17. Well, when I say it didn't go well, I mean whatever it is that he did, had the desired effect, but it was not a good thing, that he did. 2 Samuel 17, Ahithophel's advice, his second piece of advice now as to what they were going to do about David. Say, okay, he's just fled. Should we go and kill him right now, or should we wait maybe for the army to come, then go and find him? But anyway, Ahithophel's advice is actually rejected at this point by Absalom, which was actually kind of preordained by God that it would happen this way, and as a result, because of maybe that was his career. So if somebody were to reject his advice, it was the same as I don't know, career suicide or whatever else. So he then goes and hangs himself. Hushai, who was one of David's plans, whose advice was taken by Absalom, sends word then to David to warn him about what Absalom was about to do. 2 Samuel 18, Absalom gets the entire Israel army, except obviously for the people that went with David to go and find David and kill him. So there is a war between Israel and kind of whoever was around David. We're then told that the forest, because they were fighting in some kind of forest or whatever, we're told that the forest's role had actually a bigger role in this, in this battle, because the forest ended up killing more people than the people actually themselves were killing each other. At this point, Israel, or the army of Absalom at this point, was defeated, and Joab, who was the commander of David's army, manages to kill Absalom. David hears of the death of Absalom, so even though he was his son, he still loved him, and even though he had, taken power from him, etc., he heard about the death of Absalom and he was mourning, and obviously there was a bit of drama actually with Joab over this. 2 Samuel 19, Joab rebukes David, for this behavior, or this morning, say, all these people just went out to give their lives for you to take care of this Absalom issue, but now instead of congratulating your armies, you're crying for Absalom, and that wasn't a great thing, in the eyes of Joab or or the people. Then after this, because Absalom is now dead, the threat is now dead, a process starts again to reinstate David as the king of Israel again. So David then rewards the people who were loyal to him during this time. 2 Samuel 20, David arrives back at Jerusalem, because remember, he had fled from Jerusalem, but now he comes back to Jerusalem to resume being king. But there's a guy called Sheba who starts a revolution or a mini revolt, really saying, no, we don't want David to be king over us, etc., which was a bad move, I suppose, on Sheba's part. But Sheba then flees at this point. At the same time, David's relationship with Joab and his brothers had never been really that great. Maybe he didn't like the way that they went about things, so he installed a new commander called Amasa. But we hear that Amasa at this point is killed by Joab. Joab then also continues and goes and kills Sheba. 2 Samuel 20:21, there is a famine, a drought in the land for 3 years in a row straight, and David goes to God to ask, what the point of the the famine was and what they could do, to make sure that it would pass. Then he's actually told that something that Saul had done in his previous reign to the Gibeonites. If you remember, the Gibeonites had signed a peace treaty with the Israelites all the way back when they got into the promised land. But Saul did something, he killed them, maybe trying to please the Israelites or whatever else. But this was the reason for the famine. So God told them, tells David that he would have to do whatever it is that the Gibeonites wanted, so as to make sure that this famine will go away. So they then actually go ahead and do that. We also hear about more wars that David was involved in. He won most of them, but there was a time that he almost died. So the army asked him to retire, because perhaps he was getting old and they didn't want him to get killed. 2 Samuel chapter 22, which is today's last chapter, David writes a song or a psalm after all his battles and wars and enemies and the things that he had been through. So if you can imagine, today's reading, it spans obviously a lot of years, was not a great time for David. He had gone through a lot of things, but the fact that God had brought him back to Jerusalem, back to see the ark again, back to see the priests again, back as the king again, he's rejoicing and thanking God for all the things that he had been through. So tomorrow I think we finish off 2 Samuel. Then we get into 1 Kings, where we start to see Solomon as the new king of Israel. So King Solomon is a very, very popular king as well as far as Israel is concerned. So we will see, how that kind of went on and the exchange of power, and continue from there. So yeah, we march on, it's just book by book, day by day, and before you know it, we'll have read through the entire Bible and know kind of an idea of what it says. I'll see you guys tomorrow.